So in this first video on the judiciary, we're going to have a look and just have a little introduction to the judiciary. We'll have a look at what judges do, what the judiciary is, and how the judiciary is maintained by its independence and its neutrality. So first of all, what is the judiciary? The term judiciary simply refers to all UK judges collectively. This means every single judge from the Magistrates' Court all the way up to the Supreme Court. And there has to be a distinction made between courts of devolved bodies, so different courts in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Okay, so Scotland and Northern Ireland operate under different legal arrangement than those of England and Wales. And the most famous, most recent case of this can be seen in Miller v Johnson, okay, which was a pretty landmark case where the High Court of England and Wales ruled differently to the High Court of Scotland and the Supreme Court. Okay, so we see that rulings are different from different judges and different courts within the country. So what is really the difference between having a criminal law system and having a civil law system? Without getting into the legal theory too much, criminal law simply deals with crimes by an individual or group against the state. So such cases are normally brought by the state and can lead to imprisonment or fines, for example. Civil law is concerned with the interrelationships between different individuals and groups. So matters of contracts, okay, so having or matters of tort. Tort is a kind of law which involves cases of like negligence or defamation or something like that, okay, and also cases in trusts, so trusts law, okay, the idea of equities and trusts. So there's more civil law than there is criminal law out there, okay, so the most important thing is that there are two distinctions between different types of law, and they tend to go up two different avenues up the judicial system. With that being said, what do judges actually do? So judges at all levels are involved in ensuring that justice is done. Okay, so at lower levels, the main role of judges is to preside over trials. And at high court level, judges hear more serious cases and can also hear cases that are appealed from lower courts. So a lower court decision could be made, and the losing side could appeal to a higher court to hear that case again, almost get a second opinion. The Court of Appeal is generally concerned with clarifying the meaning of law. Okay, and the Supreme Court hears appeals from lower courts, but only deals with matters of law on a national level. So you will not generally, the Supreme Court generally picks cases that will be deemed to have a relatively significant constitutional consequence and not just affect a very, very small minority of the country. So with that being said, let's have a look at judicial independence and judicial neutrality. So all levels of the judiciary are expected to operate with a high level of independence. So it is often said that courts should be apolitical. This means they should not get involved in matters of politics, but only matters of law. The former Supreme Court Justice Jonathan Sumpton makes very clear in lectures on matters of politics are for politicians and matters of law are for courts. So he makes a very clear distinction between the matters of politics and the matters of law. It is important to draw a clear distinction between judicial independence and judicial neutrality. So judicial independence means that they are not subject to external control. If they were subject to external control, this could compromise their neutrality. So, for example, if the judiciary was heavily funded by the government, then cases involving the government cannot be said to be neutral, since the judiciary would have a vested interest in the government winning the case, because you have the funding there. Okay. This is why strict rules are in place to ensure that the judiciary is independent and thus, because of its independence, can therefore be neutral. So how is independence maintained? Well, there is what's known as a security of tenure. So judges are appointed for an open-ended term, okay, limited only by the requirement that they must retire at the age of 75. So, for example, the current Supreme Court President, Lady Hale, will retire in early 2020. Okay, the security of tenure allows no one to bribe or threaten judges with the loss of a job. They also have guaranteed salaries that are paid from a consolidated fund. This is a government bank account used to pay salaries of judges and other officials. So this fund is managed by the Bank of England and thus is not subject to political control, specifically government political control. So there can't be any kind of case of people bribing judges with more money. There's also the principle of contempt of court. So media ministers are prevented from speaking on the trial because they can be charged with contempt of court. So the separation of powers is also very important. So now the Lord Chancellor no longer sits in all three branches of government and the Supreme Court is open, there is more of a separation of powers. There is an independent appointment system. So the Constitutional Reform Act of 2005 created what's known as the JAC, which is the Judicial Appointments Committee. This made the appointments of judges more transparent and more independent. So with that being said, has the judiciary become more politicized in recent years? And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of opinions about this particular question, and we're going to dive into some sort of yes or no answers in this video. So with the recent Gina Miller case and toxic discourse surrounding Brexit, some argue that the UK judiciary has become more politicized. Okay, measures like the Human Rights Act have drawn senior judges into the political sphere, with the Supreme Court being able to rule that legislation is incompatible with the Human Rights Act. We looked at that in a video on human rights and civil liberties. Okay, and the famous Factor Tame case in the 1990 showed that the UK courts are able to suspend acts of Parliament if they contradict EU law. Okay, so we can see that there are suggestions that the Supreme Court has become more politicized in recent years, and these are really three of the main arguments that we could use to suggest this is the case.